Let's dig into the two new rules that were implemented to the competition for MLS Next Pro. The two of them are the off-field treatment rule as well as the new red card suspension rule. Let's start with the red card suspension rule. If a player receives a red card now, he will serve the resulting 1-game suspension against that same opponent. The rule applies in the case of a red card or a second yellow card. The belief there was to provide greater benefit to the club that suffered the foul of a resulting red card. We got some questions from some fans that we're going to sprinkle in here for you, Ali. And the first one is just, how did this rule come about?
So, to be honest with you, not just this rule, with both rules, and then a lot of rules I think that will come down the pipe hopefully next year and beyond. One of the pillars of the league, this is our first year we created this league, and one of the pillars is innovation. And so, in April we created an on-field innovation committee. Since then, we've been discussing a number of new concepts and ideas of how we can help evolve the game. I've spoken to a number of different, federations, people around the game, internally, externally, and the game's been around for over 100 years, and we have some rules that are over 100 years old as well. Although it's played differently by the players, it's coached tactically different by coaches, it's consumed and watched differently by fans, and so we're not trying to change the universe or change the sport, but there are opportunities to evolve the game to meet the needs and demands of the modern game. And so for all those conversations, we arrived at hopefully implementing these two new rules beginning tonight, and through tons of conversations and looking at the game in terms of where there are strengths and weaknesses. With the red card rule specifically, that's a rule. When a player receives a red card, there's really two you know primary changes that happen. Either the one team gets the benefit of playing up a player for the remainder of the game, and then the second benefit is that the next team gets to benefit from that player not being available. And if a team is on the short end of the stick of suffering a red card, we think that that team should get both of those benefits. And so we're trying to provide a little bit of equity and fairness into the resulting discipline of a red card.
So Ali, for this red card rule, what happens if you get a red card and your team doesn't play the other team again this season? They won't face each other again. How does that work?
Yeah, good question. And if you don't play the team the remainder of the season, then it'll revert to the status quo. That player will just miss the next game. So yeah. So there's some small nuances, but yeah, it's the same way if it was the last game of the regular season. If you're in the playoffs, of course you'd miss that playoff game. But if your team's not in the playoffs, then you'd miss the first game of the regular season the next year.
Ali, one of the other questions we got from fans was what if the player gets traded? So the team, it does have another team on the schedule again, but then they get moved.
So if a player gets traded, it would the same concept would apply. If the new team that the player is traded to, if they play that team again, then that player would have to sit out that game. However, if the new team does not play that team again, then the player would sit out his first game with his new team.
Ali, the next time the two teams face off, let's say it's in the playoffs, is it the same rules that apply?
No, not the same rule doesn't. And especially in our playoff format, at least in MLS Next Pro, there are single game eliminations. So you wouldn't play the team again. But these are all really important. All these new rules, they have these little nuances, and there's so many different situations that happen, in the course of a season. So it's really important that we talk about these.
Let's move on to the off-field treatment rule. The rule that the language, the way we have seen it, is if a player is suspected to have an injury and is on the ground for longer than 15 seconds, a medical crew will come onto the field to evaluate the player and then assist him off the field. Once the player is off the field, the player can be treated by medical staff and be required to remain off the field for 3 minutes. There are specific exemptions to this, such as head injury, cardiac issues, other serious medical issues. Ali, talk to us a little bit about the background in coming up with this rule and why it was created this way.
The red card rule is really, you're dealing with a lot of a lot of stuff on the back end, administratively and everything else. This off-field treatment rule is, it addresses a lot of things in the game right now. We think it has the potential to really have a significant impact. Essentially, um, you know, when you take a step back, you think that when a game is being played and you have thousands of fans watching the game, a player has a potential injury, and you've got 21 other players, you've got thousands of people watching the game, you've got both benches, you have fans that are watching the game on broadcast. All those people should not have to watch a player stretching his calf or getting a magic spray. We think that this is an opportunity for a player to really be removed from the field of play, to get treatment in a really less pressurized environment. It's more controlled. Giving the medical staff and the player, an opportunity to really receive the type of care that he needs. So we're excited from that aspect of it. And then I would be remiss if I didn't say that we think that there's just tons of moments that happen in the game, or in a game where a team is trying to delay the game to gain a competitive advantage. And that happens quite a bit. And we think that this is going to have not just an impact long term, or it's going to take some time, but I think this will have an impact from the jump, day one. And we think we can help reduce those instances. And I think in all cases, it's good to have more soccer, and of course, we can get very academic and say this is going to increase effective match time, but finding ways to keep the flow of the game going is not just about effective match time. It's also about momentum and rhythm, which sometimes can be broken, changes that has an impact on the game. So we're really excited about this particular rule, because of course the benefits of players being treated off the field we think will be valuable, but also very, very hopeful that this is going to put a real dent into those instances where players are deliberately trying to gain a competitive advantage by delaying the game.
Ali, can a player leave the field and not have to sit out for the entire 3 minutes?
Yes. So of course you outlined earlier, there are some exceptions. If the player suffers has a challenge or a foul, and suffered from a red or a yellow card, if there's something with a head injury, or a cardiac, or really life-threatening event, there are some of those carve-outs where players can be evaluated on the field, be treated off the field, and still not have to wait that required 3 minutes. And then also, if a player's on the field and he gets a Charlie horse, or he gets a stinger, or his foot gets, it's freezing cold out, or it's rain, and the player gets his foot stepped on, sometimes you might need an additional 5 seconds, or 10 seconds to really get yourself, as a player, to get yourself ready and engaged. But in that sense, we're saying that should still occur. The player can say, hey ref, I just need a little bit of time, but the game should continue. And so that's an instance where the player can still kind of get himself ready. He's not completely, and the game starts. Or player can say, hey, I want to voluntarily take myself off the field. So the player can always, if he thinks he may have a potential injury, or he wants to get checked out, he can always leave the field of play voluntarily. And in that sense, he can get checked out by his medical crew and then get waved on by the referee without waiting that required 3 minutes. So there are a number of different instances where we can keep the game going, and the players can still either, in conjunction with the ref, elect to have the medical crew come off, or maybe the player removes himself voluntarily and get treatment, off the field in that way.
Two questions about the trainer that we got from the fans as well, and ourselves. One is, does the trainer still need to be waved on by the referee? And then you talk about the serious injury in which the player won't be taken off the field outside of the head injuries and cardiac moments. Who makes the judgment in that moment of the player needs to stay put?
Yeah, well, I think the ref always needs to do what's in the best interest of player safety, and there are those instances where you need to get the medical crew on as quickly as possible. But you guys, you've watched these games. It's a lot of these things. It's a conversation that happens through the course of 90 minutes, and in that situation, it's really important that the referee and the player have some type of conversation. Hey, are you okay to go? Or otherwise, I'm going to bring the medical crew on. And to the extent that happens, that's when the referee will then wave the medical crew on. They'll come, evaluate the player, assess him, and then make sure that he leaves the field of play.
Ali, who's timing the 3 minutes? Who's in charge of that?
Yeah, the fourth official. So,
Okay.
essentially what's going to happen is player goes down on the ground. 10 seconds transpires. The referee, is talking to the player. Hey, are you okay? What's going on? The player that says, yeah, you know what? I got a bit of a stinger. I'll be fine. And so let's keep playing. Or the player says, listen, I've got something, and I need to see my athletic trainer. Or I need to see my medical crew. In that sense, the referee will then signal to the team's medical crew for those crew members to get on the field. And then once the player is off the field, the fourth official will start the 3 minute once the ball is back in play and once the ball moves. And so there's a responsibility on behalf of the fourth official that he needs to communicate to both team benches when the 3 minutes will start and when the 3 minutes will stop. But the fourth official will be the responsible party in that respect. And then in that sense, the player is going to get waved on the field in the same way that when a player leaves the field now, and he says, "Hey, I'm ready to get on." And so that, there's kind of this conversation, and there's this dance between the linesman, the fourth official, and the center ref of trying to get the player on the field as quickly as possible, in a fair way, so to speak.
Interesting stuff going on. As Ali Curtis, Senior Vice President of MLS Next Pro, mentioned, this is a league that's built on innovation. This is going to be really interesting to watch. These rules will go into effect tonight. Rochester hosting the Philadelphia Union 2. You can watch all those matches on MLSNextPro.com. Ali, since we have you, we wanted to close you out on one more question from us, which was half a season in, MLS Next Pro. We've seen over the last week the stories around Jason Russell-Rowe, his effect on Columbus Crew, now on an MLS squad, Chris Donovan as well with the Philadelphia Union. How exciting was that for yourself? And MLS Next Pro President Charles Olczyk, everyone part of this league. And at this point right now, are you where you wanted to be? Sort of where does the league stand halfway into its first season?
I think things are going, thus far, I think we've been able to build a really good league. But there's still a lot of work to go, being 6 months in, but we're hitting on a lot of the different key points and key areas that we wanted to have some success in, but there's still a lot more work to do. We've got 21 teams. We'll add a number, the balance of MLS clubs, next year. We have a number of conversations with different independent teams that will come into the league as well, to expand our footprint. We're looking at expanding, the number of games that we play, but we're really, looking at the league holistically. There's just a number of areas that we still need to build, and we'll do that in short order. Even some of the questions that you get now is, why would you implement 2 new rules mid-season? Right? And what I would say is there's no time like the present. To plant a seed, to grow a tree, to do these types of things, to build and progress. And that's what we're doing with this league. We're really proud. We've got a great group of people that are working in the league office and dedicated, and in terms of improving in all areas. And then I think the clubs have done an excellent job. It's not easy to just create a league in such short order, but the collaboration and the hard work of the clubs is a reason why we are where we are, so quickly. But there's still a lot of work to go. I love the stories of Jason, and a number of other players have made the jump. It's been interesting also. There's been a number of different rules. Even the CBA in MLS has changed, and it gives a little bit more greater opportunity for some of those guys to find opportunities in league play, which has happened as well. So we're seeing a lot of the benefits, I think, on the field, already. I think that will continue. I think we'll see some greater benefits as well off the field you know, in 2023 and beyond. But happy where things are, but you know, not settled, you know, and so we'll continue to push this thing to the limit and keep going.